In a modest auto repair shop on the outskirts of town, Mike Thompson's weathered hands moved with practiced precision over scraps of metal and spare parts. For 25 years, he'd fixed everything from rusty pickup trucks to luxury sedans, but nothing had ever mattered as much as the project before him now. A young boy named Tommy had walked into his shop yesterday, born without his right arm, his eyes full of a hope that broke Mike's heart. Through the night, Mike worked tirelessly, transforming discarded parts into something miraculous, a custom-fitted prosthetic arm. He never expected that his act of kindness would change not just Tommy's life, but his own destiny forever. What could possibly bring a private jet to a humble mechanic's doorstep the very next morning? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The antique clock on Mike Thompson's workshop wall hadn't kept proper time in years, but he couldn't bring himself to replace it. Sarah had given it to him when they first opened the shop, insisting that even a mechanic's workspace needed something. Classic and beautiful, now its brass face dulled with age, it still watched over him as the early morning sun crept through the grimy windows. Mike wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better days and surveyed his kingdom, if you could call it that. Thompson's Auto Repair occupied a weathered building that looked more lived in than most homes. Tools lined the walls in meticulous order, each one cleaned and returned to its proper place every night, no matter how exhausted he felt. The concrete floor bore decades of oil stains, telling stories of countless repairs and late nights. A half-rebuilt carburetor sat on his workbench, another project for someone who couldn't afford dealership prices. Mike picked it up, examining the intricate parts he'd cleaned last night. Mrs. Rodriguez's ancient Buick needed it, and she'd been getting by on a widow's pension. He'd quoted her half his usual rate, same as he did for most of the regulars who struggled to make ends meet. The bell above the door chimed, and Jack Wheeler's familiar heavy boots clomped across the floor. "Morning, Mike. Coffee's fresh at the diner." The older man carried 2 steaming cups, setting one on the cleanest corner of Mike's bench. "Jack, you're a lifesaver." Mike took a grateful sip. "How's that transmission holding up?" "Smooth as silk, though word is might not be able to come to you much longer." Jack's weathered face creased with concern. "Heard rumors about developers sniffing around. They trying to buy you out?" Mike's jaw tightened. The letter from the bank sat unopened in his office, but he knew what it said. Same thing as the last 3. Warnings about missed payments, talk of foreclosure. "Nothing's decided," he said finally. "This shop's been here 30 years. Not giving up without a fight." He glanced at Sarah's photo on the wall, her smile, unchanged since the day they'd cut the ribbon on their dream. The cancer had taken her 5 years ago, but sometimes he still caught himself turning to share a joke or ask her opinion on a tricky repair. She'd been the one with the head for business. He just liked fixing things. Jack seemed to read his mind. Sarah would have figured something out. That woman could squeeze blood from a stone. That she could. Mike managed to smile. Remember when? She convinced that Corvette owner his car needed a custom calibration just so she could charge him double. Used the money to fix old Pete's truck for free. Heart of gold, head for business. Jack raised his cup in a small salute. "Like someone else I know. Half this town would be walking if it weren't for your payment plans." The morning light caught the carburetor's clean metal, and Mike turned it in his hands. Every part had its purpose, its place in the greater whole. Sometimes, when things got tough, he envied the simplicity of machines. Their problems could always be fixed with the right tools and enough patience. "Better get this installed before Mrs. Rodriguez's shift starts," he said, carefully setting aside the memories with the coffee cup. "Thanks for the coffee, Jack." "Any time." Jack paused at the door. "You know, if you ever need help with the books or anything." Mike waved him off. "I'll manage. Always have." As Jack's boots retreated down the cracked sidewalk, Mike turned. Back to his workbench. The carburetor wouldn't fix itself, and there were 3 more jobs lined up before noon. He'd worry about the bank later. Right now, someone needed his help, and that was something he understood perfectly well. The morning stretched ahead, full of the familiar symphony of metal on metal, air tools whining, and the quiet satisfaction of making broken things whole. Again! Whatever tomorrow might bring, today there was work to be done, and Mike Thompson had never been one to leave a job unfinished. The afternoon sun had turned the workshop into an oven when Mike heard the door creak open. He was deep under a Chevy's hood, wrestling with a stubborn timing belt, and called out his usual greeting. "Be with you in just a minute. Take your time, dear," came a gentle, elderly voice. "We're in no hurry." Something in her tone made Mike pause. He extracted himself from the engine compartment and turned to find an elegant grandmother holding the hand of a boy who couldn't have been more than 10. The child partially hid behind her, but his eyes darted curiously around the shop, taking in the organized chaos of tools and parts. "I'm Margaret Wilson," the woman said, "and this is Tommy." She gave the boy's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "We've heard wonderful things about you, Mr. Thompson." Mike wiped his hands clean, noticing how Tommy kept his right side angled away from view. "Mike, please, what can I help you folks with today?" Margaret knelt beside Tommy, whispering something in his ear. The boy nodded and stepped forward, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. With his left hand, he carefully smoothed it out on the edge of Mike's workbench. It was a drawing done in the bold strokes of a child's crayon. Two figures stood holding hands, one tall, one small, and both had two arms reaching toward a bright yellow sun. Mike's throat tightened as he understood. "Tommy was born without his right arm," Margaret explained softly. "We've been to specialists, but the prosthetics they offer—" She trailed off, her eyes growing distant. "On a teacher's pension, I just can't." Mike studied the drawing again. In his 30 years of fixing cars, he'd seen countless miracles of engineering. Every vehicle that came through his door was a puzzle waiting to be solved, a collection of parts working in harmony. But this was different. "I've always wondered," Tommy spoke up suddenly, his voice small but clear, "what it feels like to catch a baseball." He touched the drawing with his fingertips, "or to give my grandma a real hug." Mike found himself transported back 40 years to a young boy who spent hours in his father's garage, dreaming of becoming an inventor. That boy had believed anything was possible with enough determination and the right tools. Somewhere along the way between bills and responsibilities, he'd forgotten that feeling. "You know," Mike said, pulling up a stool to sit at eye level with Tommy, "I once built a remote-controlled car from scratch, just using spare parts from around the shop. Everyone said it couldn't be done, but..." He gestured at the shelves of tools and components surrounding them. "Sometimes the right pieces are just waiting to be put together in a new way." Tommy's eyes widened. "You think you could?" "I don't know," Mike answered honestly, "but I'd sure like to try." He looked up at Margaret. "If you'll trust me with something this important." The grandmother's eyes glistened. "Trust isn't the issue, Mr. Thompson, but we can't possibly afford..." Mike waved away her concerns. "Let me worry about that part. Right now, I'd like to take some measurements, if that's okay with Tommy." The boy nodded eagerly, already rolling up his sleeve. As Mike retrieved his precision calipers from the toolbox, he caught sight of Sarah's photo on the wall. She seemed to be smiling a little brighter than usual, and he could almost hear her voice. "Some things are worth more than money, Mike Thompson." He turned back to Tommy, who now stood straighter, hope radiating from his small frame. "All right, young man, let's see what we can create together." The afternoon light streamed through the workshop windows, casting long shadows across the floor. As Mike carefully measured and documented every detail, Tommy's drawing lay on the workbench beside them, a child's dream rendered in crayon, waiting to become reality. After Tommy and his grandmother left, Mike sat alone in his office, staring at the measurements he'd taken. The shop's ancient computer hummed to life, its fan whirring like a tired engine. He'd never felt more aware of how outdated everything was. The dial-up internet, the coffee-stained desk, the filing cabinet held shut with a rubber band. "What am I getting myself into, Sarah?" he muttered, glancing at her photo. The search results for prosthetic arm design filled his screen, with technical terminology he barely understood. Biomechanical interface, myoelectric sensors, actuator mechanisms. His eyes drifted to the bottom shelf of his bookcase, where a dusty cardboard box sat untouched for 5 years. Sarah's things, the ones he couldn't bear to part with but couldn't look at either. With a deep breath, he pulled it out. Inside, beneath a folder of their wedding photos and her favorite sweater, he found what he was looking for: Sarah's old engineering textbooks from her unfinished degree, before they'd decided to open the shop instead. She'd always said she'd go back someday. The biomedical engineering book was comprehensive, its margins filled with her neat handwriting. "Always start with the basics," she'd written on the first page. "Everything complex is just simple parts. Working together." Mike smiled, running his finger along her words. That's exactly what he needed, to break this down into parts he understood. Motors he knew, joints and bearings he knew. The human arm was just another kind of machine, wasn't it? He reached for his phone and dialed a number from memory. "After." "3 rings," a familiar voice answered. "St. Mary's Medical Supply, this is Dave speaking." "Dave, it's Mike Thompson. Remember that favor you owe me for fixing your daughter's car before prom?" A chuckle came through the line. "The legendary midnight alternator replacement. How could I forget? What do you need?" Mike took a deep breath. "Everything you've got on prosthetic arms. Catalogs, specs, supplier information. Anything." There was a pause. "Mike, that's not exactly our usual inventory. We're talking specialized equipment, medical-grade materials." "I know it's a lot to ask, Dave, but there's this kid." As Mike explained Tommy's situation, he began sketching on a notepad. Simple shapes at first, the basic structure of an arm, the pivot points, the grip mechanism. His mechanical mind started breaking down the impossible into the possible. "I can't get you the high-end stuff," Dave said finally, "but I've got some old catalogs and sample parts in storage. Maybe even a demonstration model from a conference last year. It's outdated, but..." "It's perfect," Mike interrupted. "I just need to understand how they work. The rest..." He looked around his workshop, seeing potential in every spare part. "An abandoned project. The rest I'll figure out." After hanging up, Mike pulled out Sarah's notebook, still tucked inside her textbook. Page after page of precise diagrams and formulas, interspersed with doodles and random thoughts. Near the back, he found a section on prosthetics from an elective she'd taken. "The greatest challenge," she'd written, "isn't building something that works. It's building something that feels like part of you." The workshop clock showed 7 p.m. Outside, the summer evening painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Mike should have closed up an hour ago, but the stack of reference materials was growing on his desk, and his notepad was filling with ideas. He thought of Tommy's drawing, of the simple joy of a child imagining having 2 arms. Sometimes the most complicated problems had the simplest hearts. This wasn't about building the most advanced prosthetic. It was about giving a boy the chance to catch a baseball. Mike pulled Sarah's textbook closer, flipped to the first chapter and began to read. The night ahead was long, but somewhere between these pages and his lifetime of mechanical knowledge, he would find a way. She had always told him he could fix anything, if he just took the time to understand it first. "All right, Sarah," he whispered. "To the quiet workshop, help me figure this one out." The first prototype looked more like modern art than a prosthetic arm. Mike stood back from his workbench, squinting at the assembly of salvaged car parts and repurposed mechanisms. A power window motor formed the elbow joint brake line segments, acted as tendons, and parts from a convertible top mechanism created the fingers. It was crude, but it moved. "Got your care package," he said into his cell phone, wedged between his ear and shoulder while he adjusted a connection. "Thanks, Dave. Those catalogs are worth their weight in gold." "Find anything useful in there?" Dave asked. Mike tightened a bolt holding the makeshift wrist assembly. Actually, yeah, never realized how similar a prosthetic finger joint is to a double-action hinge. Been staring at the answer in my cabinet of spare parts for years, scattered across. His workbench lay the remnants of his first 3 attempts. Each failure taught him something new. The first was too heavy. He'd use steel when aluminum would do. The second couldn't generate enough grip strength. The third had decent movement but lacked fine control. This fourth version incorporated lessons from all 3. He'd stripped down a small servo motor from a high-end car's adjustable mirror, reprogramming it to provide precise finger control. The aluminum framework came from an old racing pedal, lightweight but strong. Every component had been carefully selected, tested, and modified. "You know," Dave said thoughtfully, "most prosthetics these days use microprocessors and advanced materials." "Can't afford those," Mike replied, flexing the mechanical fingers. "But I've got something they don't. 30 years of making things work with whatever's on hand. Remember that Porsche with the custom cooling system I built from scratch? The Surge one you fixed with parts from a lawnmower? Same principle here, different application, same problem solving." Mike set down his wrench and picked up the arm. In the harsh fluorescent shop light, his welds gleamed like silver rivers across the metal. Each joint moved smoothly, each finger responding to the control mechanism he'd devised. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional. He thought about Tommy's drawing, still tacked to his bulletin board. The boy hadn't drawn a fancy prosthetic with blinking lights and chrome finish. He'd drawn a simple arm, one that could help him hug his grandmother. The clock showed 2 a.m. when Mike finally tested the grip strength. He'd rigged up a pressure sensor using parts from an old brake system pressure gauge. The fingers closed around a baseball, steady, controlled, strong enough to hold but not so tight as to damage the cover. "What do you think, Sarah?" he asked. The quiet workshop. "Getting closer, aren't we?" A memory surfaced. Sarah in her college days, explaining a complex engineering concept by comparing it to baking. "Everything's connected," she'd said, "like ingredients in a recipe. Change one thing, and you have to adjust everything else to match." Mike made one final adjustment to the tension in the finger mechanisms. The movements became smoother, more natural. It wasn't perfect. The wrist rotation was still jerky, and the elbow joint needed better dampening, but it was progress. He placed the prototype carefully on his workbench, surrounded by tools and reference materials. Tomorrow, he'd need to figure out how to make it comfortable for Tommy to wear. The connection between flesh and machine would be crucial. But for now, he had proof that his crazy idea might actually work. The workshop was silent, except for the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional tick of cooling metal. Mike gathered his scattered notes, adding them to the growing pile of calculations and sketches. Each page represented another step toward turning Tommy's crayon drawing into reality. His phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "Tommy hasn't stopped. Talking about his new arm. Thank you for giving him hope." Mike looked at the prototype, its metallic fingers catching the light. Hope was a powerful thing. It had kept him going after Sarah died, kept the shop open through tough times, and now it was driving him to attempt something he'd never dreamed of building. "One step at a time," he murmured, echoing Sarah's favorite phrase. "One problem solved leads to the next solution." Outside, the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky. Another day of regular repairs awaited, but now Mike had a purpose that went beyond fixing cars. On his workbench, the prototype seemed to gleam with possibility, each carefully crafted joint a promise waiting to be fulfilled. The modified servo motor hummed quietly as Mike made his final adjustments. He'd been up since dawn, testing and retesting every component. The morning's scheduled oil changes sat untouched. Today belonged to Tommy. The bell above the door chimed at exactly 10 o'clock. Tommy burst in ahead of his grandmother, practically bouncing with excitement. "Is it ready, Mr. Thompson? Can I see it?" Margaret followed more slowly, her face a mixture of hope and concern. Tommy, remember what we discussed about being patient? Mike smiled, remembering his own childhood enthusiasm for new mechanical wonders. It's all right. Come on over here, Tommy. I've got something to show you. He'd cleaned off his main workbench, laying out the prototype on a fresh white towel. The morning sun, streaming through the windows, made the polished aluminum gleam. Tommy's eyes went wide as he approached. "It looks like a robot arm," he exclaimed, leaning in for a closer look. "Sort of is," Mike replied, picking it up carefully. "See this part here? It's from a car's side mirror, helps the fingers move. And this," he pointed to the elbow joint, "that used to help roll up windows in a Mercedes." Tommy reached out to touch it, then hesitated, looking at his grandmother for permission. She nodded, and his fingers traced the smooth metal curves. "The most important part," Mike continued, "is how it connects to you. I've made this padding here special, using material from high-end car seats. Should be comfortable." Margaret stepped closer, examining the craftsmanship. "It's remarkable, Mr. Thompson, but will it work?" "Only one way to find out." Mike turned to Tommy. "Ready to try it on?" The boy nodded eagerly, rolling up his sleeve. Mike had spent hours studying the attachment mechanism, designing it to be both secure and comfortable. With gentle movements, he helped Tommy slip into the custom-fitted socket. "How does that feel? Any pinching or pressure points?" Tommy shook his head, staring at the mechanical arm, now extending from his right side. "It feels strange, but not bad." "Okay, now for the tricky part." Mike knelt beside him. "See these two sensors here? They'll pick up the muscles in your arm moving. Think about making a fist. Just think about it first. Don't try to move anything yet." Tommy's face scrunched in concentration. The fingers of the prosthetic twitched slightly, then remained still. "That's normal," Mike assured him. "Quickly. Take some practice. Let's try something simpler." He placed a foam ball in front of Tommy. "Just reach for this." The mechanical arm moved jerkily, overshooting its target. Tommy's face fell. "I can't do it." "Hey now," Mike said firmly. "Remember what I told you about cars? Sometimes they need a little adjustment before they run right. This is just the first try." He made some quick modifications to the sensor sensitivity, tightening a few connections. "Okay, let's try again. This time move very slowly." Tommy took a deep breath and reached out again. The movement was still awkward, but the arm responded better. His fingers closed around the ball, too tight at first, crushing the foam, but then he adjusted his grip. "I'm holding it!" His face lit up with wonder. "Grandma, look, I'm really holding it." Margaret wiped tears from her eyes. "I see, sweetheart, I see." Mike watched as Tommy practiced picking up and releasing the ball, each attempt a little smoother than the last. The servo motor purred steadily, its salvage parts working in perfect harmony. There were still issues to resolve. The wrist rotation needed work, and the finger response could be more precise. But seeing Tommy's joy made every late night worth it. "Mr. Thompson," Tommy looked up at him, still clutching the foam ball. "Do you think, could I learn to catch a real baseball with this?" Mike thought of all the adjustments still needed, the improvements he could make. "Tell you what, give me until tomorrow morning. I've got some ideas that might help with that." "You've already done so much," Margaret began, but Mike shook his head. "Some things are worth losing sleep over." He helped Tommy carefully remove the prosthetic. "Besides, I think I know exactly what it needs." After they left, Mike turned back to his workbench. The prototype had shown him what worked and what needed improvement. He had one night to make it perfect, one night to turn a mechanical device into something more, something that could help a young boy's dreams take flight. The servo motor sat at the heart of it all, a testament to what could be accomplished with determination and ingenuity. Mike picked up his tools, ready to begin. Again, sometimes the smallest parts made the biggest differences. Coffee-stained blueprints covered Mike's workbench, each page marked with calculations and adjustments. The evening had melted into night as he refined every component of Tommy's arm. His own coffee sat cold and forgotten beside him, the mug leaving rings on his latest sketches. Finger response time needs to be faster, he muttered, making another note. The test fitting had shown him exactly where improvements were needed. Each movement had to be more natural, more intuitive. A baseball wouldn't wait for delayed reactions. He'd cannibalized 3 more power window motors before finding the perfect balance of speed and control. The new finger mechanisms responded almost instantly to the sensor inputs, using a modified version of the same technology that made luxury cars anticipate their drivers' needs. A knock at the shop's back door startled him. Dave from the medical supply store stood there holding a small box. "Thought you might still be up." "Dave, it's got to be past midnight." "1:45, actually." Dave set the box on the workbench. "Found these in our warehouse. Prototype sensor pads from last year's demo models, medical grade, already approved for skin contact. Better than whatever you've jury-rigged." Mike opened the box, examining the thin, flexible sensors. "These are perfect, but Dave, these must cost. Consider it my contribution." Dave picked up one of the blueprints, whistling softly. "You know, when you first told me about this project, I thought you were crazy, but this," he gestured at the prosthetic. This is something special." The new sensors integrated perfectly with Mike's design. He replaced the makeshift pressure sensors with the medical-grade components, recalibrating each connection. The difference was immediate: smoother response, better feedback, more precise control. "Need a hand?" Dave asked, rolling up his sleeves. "Always." Mike handed him a small wrench. "Help me with these finger joints. They need to be tight enough to grip, but loose enough to release quickly." They worked in comfortable silence, the only sounds the quiet clicks of tools and the occasional hum of testing servos. Dave's medical supply experience proved invaluable, suggesting subtle improvements to the comfort padding and attachment points. Around 3 in the morning, Mike stepped back to survey their progress. The arm looked almost entirely different. Now sleeker, more refined, but still uniquely his creation. Car parts and medical components worked together in ways their manufacturers never intended, creating something entirely new. "Ready for a full test?" Dave asked, suppressing a yawn. Mike initiated the movement sequence they'd programmed. The fingers flexed smoothly, each joint moving in perfect coordination. The wrist rotated with hardly a sound, and the elbow bent naturally. Most importantly, the grip strength adjusted automatically, gentle enough for a handshake but strong enough for a baseball. "I think," Mike said slowly, "I think this might actually work." "Might nothing," Dave replied. "This is incredible. You've basically built a custom prosthetic from spare parts and determination." Mike thought of Tommy's face during the test fitting, the moment of pure joy when he'd first gripped the foam ball. "Just hope it's good enough." "Good enough?" "Mike, look at this." Dave pointed to the blueprints scattered across the workbench. "You've created something unique here. The way you've integrated these different technologies, made them work together, I've never seen anything like it." The workshop clock ticked steadily toward dawn. Mike gathered his notes, organizing them into a coherent record of the build process. Each page represented a problem solved, a challenge overcome. The coffee stains and smudged pencil marks told the story of this long night of creation. "Thanks, Dave. I couldn't have done this without your help. Just promise me one thing," Dave said, heading for the door. "When Tommy throws his first baseball, take a picture." After Dave left, Mike made one final adjustment to the arm's control mechanism. The sunrise was beginning to paint the sky outside his workshop windows, marking the end of this marathon building session. In a few hours, Tommy would return, eager to try on his new arm. Mike picked up the final blueprint, studying the complete design. What had started as a crazy idea had evolved into something remarkable. Every component, every connection, represented the best of his 30 years of mechanical knowledge, combined with Sarah's engineering wisdom. "Almost ready, Tommy," he whispered to the quiet workshop. "Almost ready." Morning sunlight streamed through the workshop windows, catching the polished surface of the completed prosthetic arm. Mike had cleaned every component until it gleamed, though he'd left some of the automotive heritage visible. Small touches that reminded him of where each part had come from, the journey from car parts to something miraculous. The bell chimed right at 8. Tommy practically ran inside, his grandmother following with an amused smile. The boy stopped short when he saw the arm on the workbench, his eyes wide. Is that mine? Come see, Mike said softly, gesturing him over. The prosthetic looked different from yesterday's prototype, sleeker, more refined, with smooth transitions between components and carefully crafted joints. The control sensors were nearly invisible, integrated seamlessly into the comfortable padding. I made some improvements last night, Mike explained, helping Tommy into the fitted socket. The sensors are more sensitive now, and the fingers respond faster. He secured the final connection. How does that feel? Tommy flexed his new arm experimentally. The movements were smoother, more natural than before. It feels lighter? Aluminum parts from a racing car, Mike nodded. Strong but lightweight. Try picking something up. He placed a baseball on the workbench. Tommy reached for it, his mechanical fingers opening smoothly. The grip closed perfectly around the ball, neither too tight nor too loose. I'm holding it, Tommy's voice cracked with emotion. Really holding it. Margaret stepped closer, touching the arm gently. It's beautiful, Mr. Thompson. I never imagined. Try throwing it, Mike suggested, moving to create some space. Just like we practiced yesterday, but trust the arm to do its part. Tommy drew his arm back carefully, then made a throwing motion. The ball released at exactly the right moment, sailing across the workshop to land in Mike's waiting hands. Perfect, Mike grinned. Want to try catching? They spent the next hour practicing different movements. Tommy learned to adjust his grip strength, to coordinate natural and mechanical movements, to trust his new arm as part of himself. Each success brought fresh joy to his face. Each small mistake became a lesson quickly learned. Mr. Thompson? Tommy asked during a break. How does it know what I want it to do? Mike knelt beside him, pointing to the sensors. Remember how I said it reads your muscles? When you think about moving your arm, your muscles still respond, even if the arm isn't there. These sensors pick up those tiny movements and translate them into actions. The more you practice, the more natural it'll feel. Like learning to ride a bike. Exactly like that. Mike adjusted a minor calibration. Your body and the arm learning to work together. Margaret had been quiet, watching her grandson with tears in her eyes. Now she stepped forward, opening her purse. Mr. Thompson, I know we could never pay what this is truly worth, but I've been saving. Mike held up his hand. Put that away, Mrs. Wilson. This isn't about money. But surely. The parts were mostly recycled from the shop, he said firmly. And the work, well, some things mean more than money. Tommy, who had been experimenting with picking up different objects, turned suddenly and wrapped his arms around Mike, both arms, flesh and mechanical. The hug was slightly awkward, the prosthetic grip not quite perfectly controlled, but it was the most genuine embrace Mike had felt in years. Thank you, Tommy whispered. Thank you for making me whole. Mike had to clear his throat before he could speak. You were always whole, Tommy. This is just a tool to help you do more of what you want to do. They spent another hour going through basic maintenance procedures. Mike showed Tommy and Margaret how to check the connections, clean the components, and make minor adjustments. He'd prepared a detailed care manual, though most of the mechanical parts were designed to last. One more thing, Mike said, reaching under the workbench. He pulled out a baseball glove. Can't play catch without one of these. As Tommy slipped the glove onto his natural hand, his face lit up with pure joy. The morning sun caught both the polished metal of his new arm and the worn leather of the glove, two tools coming together to make a dream possible. Same time tomorrow? Mike asked. We can practice in the parking lot. Really? Tommy beamed. You'll teach me, every day, until you're ready for the major leagues. After they left, Mike stood in his workshop, surrounded by the tools and parts that had helped make this miracle possible. The completed prosthetic had been more than just a technical challenge. It had been a gift, not just to Tommy, but to himself as well. The sound hit Mike first, a deep, powerful thrum that made his coffee cup rattle on the workbench. He stepped outside the shop, squinting against the morning sun, and froze. A sleek private jet was descending toward the abandoned lot next to his garage, its polished fuselage gleaming. "What in the world?" he muttered, watching as the aircraft touched down with practiced precision. The lot, overgrown with weeds and littered with old car parts, had become an impromptu landing strip. A business card fluttered from his shirt pocket. He tucked it there after finding it slipped under his door that morning. The embossed letters caught the sunlight. Alexander Chen, CEO, Innovative Medical Technologies. Below that, handwritten, in precise strokes, "We need to talk." The jet's door opened, and a security team emerged first, their dark suits and earpieces conspicuously out of place in this working-class neighborhood. They quickly secured the area, speaking quietly into their wrists. Mike felt rooted to the spot, still holding his wrench from the oil change he'd been working on. A man in an impeccable charcoal suit stepped out next, followed by, Mike's heart skipped, Tommy and Margaret Wilson. Tommy was wearing his prosthetic arm, demonstrating its movement to the suited man with obvious pride. "Mr. Thompson." The man approached, hand extended. His smile was genuine, though his eyes held an intensity that commanded attention. "I'm Alexander Chen. I believe we have much to discuss." Mike shook his hand automatically, acutely aware of the grease under his fingernails. "I don't understand. Tommy, Mrs. Wilson, what's going on?" Margaret stepped forward, her face a mix of apology and excitement. "I'm so sorry for the secrecy, Mr. Thompson, but when Tommy's father heard about what you'd done—" "Father?" Mike looked at Chen, then back to Tommy. The pieces started falling into place. "Perhaps we could talk inside," Chen suggested, gesturing toward the shop. "I've spent the last year searching for someone like you, Mr. Thompson. Someone with not just the skill, but the heart to do what you've done." Inside the workshop, Chen's security team remained discreetly by the doors, while Tommy demonstrated the arm's capabilities, showing his father how he could now catch and throw a baseball, pick up small objects, even write his name. "Remarkable," Chen murmured, examining the prosthetic's construction. "You built this from automotive parts?" Mike nodded, still trying to process the situation. "Mostly. A friend in medical supply helped with some components, but the integration, the design innovations." Chen pulled out a tablet, showing Mike a series of professional prosthetic designs. "We've spent millions developing arms with half this functionality. Your solution is elegant, cost-effective, and most importantly, it works." Tommy beamed at Mike. "Dad says you're a genius." Chen smiled at his son's enthusiasm. "More than that, you're exactly what our project needs." He placed his business card on the workbench. "I've spent the past year establishing a foundation to develop affordable prosthetics for children. We have the funding, the facilities, but we've been missing something crucial." "What's that?" Mike asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Someone who can think outside the box. Someone who sees solutions where others see only problems." Chen gestured at Tommy's arm. "Someone who can take ordinary materials and create something extraordinary." The morning sun streamed through the workshop windows, highlighting the decades of wear on the concrete floor, the aging tools, the faded sign outside. Mike's kingdom of repairs and improvised solutions suddenly felt very small. "I've been working on cars for 30 years, he said slowly. "I don't know anything about medical technology, about running a business." "You know how to solve problems," Chen interrupted. "You know how to take complex challenges and break them down into manageable parts. Everything else can be learned." He paused, watching Tommy show his grandmother how he could tie his shoes. "More importantly, you understand what matters most. Giving a children like my son their independence back." Mike picked up the business card, running his thumb over the embossed letters. In his mind, he heard Sarah's voice. "Sometimes the biggest opportunities come disguised as impossible challenges." Through the window, He could see the jet gleaming in the morning sun, a symbol of a world far removed from his humble shop. Yet, here was Tommy, proudly wearing an arm built from spare parts and determination, proving that miracles could emerge from the most unlikely places. The business card felt heavy in his hand, weighted with possibility and promise. Alexander Chen pulled a worn newspaper clipping from his wallet and smoothed it carefully on Mike's workbench. The yellowed paper showed a much younger Chen standing in front of a tiny electronics repair shop, his smile bright with youthful optimism. 20 years ago, he said, I was not so different from you. My shop was smaller than this, and I fixed anything that came through the door, phones, computers, toasters, whatever paid the bills. Mike studied the photo while Tommy practiced catching with his new arm in the corner, Margaret watching proudly. The security team had stepped outside, giving them privacy. One day, a woman brought in her daughter's hearing aid. They couldn't afford a new one, and no one else would attempt the repair. Chen's eyes grew distant. I stayed up all night, learning how it worked, figuring out how to fix it with the parts I had. The girl's smile when she could hear again. That moment changed everything. He gestured toward Tommy. When my son was born without his arm, I promised myself no parent would ever have to choose between their child's needs and their financial survival. I built my company on that promise, developing medical technology that could help people. Mike picked up the newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local repairman's innovation catches Silicon Valley's eye." But somewhere along the way, Chen continued, we lost something. Our prosthetics became more advanced, more expensive. We were so focused on pushing the boundaries of technology, we forgot about the families who couldn't afford cutting-edge solutions. Tommy ran over, proudly showing off a perfect catch. Dad, did you see that? Mr. Thompson says I might be ready for Little League soon. Chen smiled, ruffling his son's hair. That's amazing, buddy. Why don't you show Grandma your curveball? After Tommy returned to his practice, Chen turned back to Mike. When Mother told me about finding your shop, about your offer to help Tommy, I couldn't believe it. I had teams of engineers working on affordable prosthetics, and here you were, building exactly what we'd been trying to achieve, using parts from old cars. He pulled out another document, a preliminary contract. I'm not just offering you a job, Mr. Thompson. I'm offering you a chance to help us remember what matters most. We have the resources, the distribution networks, the medical expertise, but we need your ingenuity, your ability to see solutions in unexpected places. Mike thought about all the cars he'd fixed over the years, all the times he'd found ways to help people who couldn't afford dealer prices. What exactly are you proposing? A new division within the foundation. You'd lead the development of affordable prosthetics, working with our engineers but maintaining your approach, complete creative freedom, full access to our resources, but focused on solutions that any family could afford. The contract outlined terms that made Mike's head spin. The salary alone was more than his shop made in 5 years. But it was the last page that caught his attention, a sketch of a modern research facility, planned for construction right here in town. You'd build it here? Chen nodded. This community trusted you for 30 years. We're not asking you to. Leave that behind. Instead, we want to build something new, right here where it all started. A place where mechanics and engineers can work together, where experience and innovation can combine to help children like Tommy. Mike watched Tommy, demonstrating his arm's dexterity to Margaret, showing how he could pick up a pencil, wave, make a fist. Each movement represented hours of problem-solving, years of mechanical knowledge applied in a new way. My wife, Sarah, Mike said slowly, she always believed technology should serve people, not the other way around. She gave up her engineering degree to help me run this shop because she saw how many people in this community needed someone who could fix things affordably. She sounds like a wise woman. She would have loved this, using what we know to help kids, to make something that families can actually afford. Mike picked up the contract. But I need to know, will I still be able to fix cars? Some of all, my customers, they depend on this shop. Chen smiled. Mr. Thompson, I'm not asking you to stop being who you are. In fact, that's exactly why we need you. Sometimes the best innovations come from keeping our feet planted firmly in the real world. The newspaper clipping lay between them, a bridge between past and future. Through the window, Mike could see his shop's old sign, faded but still proud. Beside it, he imagined a new building rising, a place where practical knowledge and cutting-edge technology could work hand in hand. Mike stood in his workshop long after the others had left, the closed sign hanging on his door for the first time during business hours in years. The sign itself was a relic, hand-painted by Sarah when they first opened. Now it faced him like a question mark, swaying slightly in the afternoon breeze. The contract sat on his workbench next to his coffee mug and Sarah's photo. Chen had left it with him, along with a simple business card bearing a phone number. Take the weekend, he'd said. Talk to people you trust. This decision shouldn't be made lightly. Tommy and Margaret had hugged him goodbye, boarding the private jet with Chen. Whatever you decide, Margaret had whispered, you've already changed our lives forever. The phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. It was Dave from the medical supply store. Just heard the news, Dave said without preamble. Private jet, fancy suits, the whole works. Word travels fast in a small town. Mike sank onto his work stool. What do you think? What do I think? I think it's about damn time someone noticed what you can do. Dave paused. But that's not what you're really asking, is it? The shop's been here 30 years, Dave. People depend on it. Mrs. Rodriguez's Buick, old Pete's truck. Who's going to help them if I close down? Who's going to help thousands of kids like Tommy if you don't? Mike glanced at the wall of photos behind his desk. Hundreds of happy customers with their repaired vehicles over the years. Each picture told a story of trust, of community, of problems solved, and lives made a little easier. It's not just about fixing cars, he said slowly. It's about being there for people who need help. And what exactly do you think you'd be doing with Chen's foundation? Dave's voice softened. Mike, I saw what you did with that arm. You took parts worth maybe $100 and created something priceless. Imagine what you could do with real resources. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the workshop floor. Mike walked to his toolbox, the one Sarah had given him on their first anniversary. Inside, wrapped in an old cloth, was a small notebook filled with her handwriting. I found some of Sarah's old notes, he said, flipping through the pages. She had ideas about prosthetics, about making medical devices more accessible. She always said engineering should help ordinary people, not just those who could afford the latest technology. Sounds like she'd vote yes. Mike smiled despite himself. She'd kick my butt for even hesitating. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Jack Wheeler, holding his usual 2 cups of coffee. Mike let him in, taking one gratefully. Thought, you might need this, Jack said, settling onto a nearby stool. Quite a morning you had. Mike filled him in on the details while Dave listened on speakerphone. The 3 men had been friends for decades, weathering recessions, personal tragedies, and countless changes in their small town. You know what this reminds me of? Jack said finally. That time the factory shut down and all those families couldn't afford their car repairs. Remember what you did? Mike nodded. He'd worked out payment plans, accepted trade-in services, sometimes just fixed things for free. It had nearly bankrupted the shop, but he couldn't bring himself to turn people away. That's why Chen wants you, Dave added. Not just because you're good with machines, but because you understand what people really need. The closed sign caught the late afternoon light. Its faded letters, a reminder of all the years that had passed. Mike thought about Tommy's face when he first caught a baseball, about Chen's story of the little girl with the hearing aid, about Sarah's dreams of making technology serve people rather than profit. The shop doesn't have to close completely, Jack suggested. Could keep it running part-time, train someone to handle the basic repairs. Best of both worlds. Mike picked up the contract again, reading through the terms more carefully. There was flexibility there, room for negotiation. Chen had been clear. They wanted his approach, his philosophy, not just his technical skills. "You know," Dave said thoughtfully, "sometimes holding on to something too tightly means missing a chance to grab onto something better." The workshop held 30 years of memories, but it also held 30 years of lessons learned. Every car he'd fixed, every problem he'd solved, had prepared him for this moment. Maybe that was the point. All those years of making do with what he had, of finding creative solutions, had been leading him here. The closed sign swayed gently, no longer feeling like an ending, but perhaps a beginning. The new workshop blueprints spread across Mike's desk like a vision of the future. The familiar outline of his old garage formed the heart of the building, but now additional wings extended outward, creating a space where innovation and practical knowledge could blend seamlessly. "The fabrication lab goes here," Chen's architect explained, pointing to a large room filled with state-of-the-art equipment. "But we're keeping your original workshop intact, just modernizing the infrastructure." Mike nodded, his finger tracing the path between old and new. "And this area here?" "Training center. You mentioned wanting to teach local mechanics new skills. This space can handle classes of up to 20. The construction crew had already begun work outside, careful not to disrupt the daily operation of the garage. Mike had insisted on keeping the shop open during the transition, and Chen had agreed. "Your community trusts you," he'd said. "Let's make sure they're part of this evolution." The sound of hammers mixed with the familiar whir of air tools as Mike walked through his shop. Jake Martinez, a young mechanic he'd hired to help with routine repairs, was finishing up an oil change. "How's it going, Jake?" "Getting the hang of your system, Mr. Thompson." Jake grinned, wiping his hands. "Though I still can't believe you're letting me apprentice in the new facility, too." "That's the whole point," Mike replied. "Bringing together different skills, different perspectives. Speaking of which, ready to learn something new?" He led Jake to his workbench, where the prototype of their second-generation prosthetic arm lay partially assembled. The design incorporated improvements based on Tommy's experience, but maintained the core principle of using affordable, readily available components. "See this motor assembly? It's from a power seat mechanism, but with these modifications," Mike demonstrated the adaptation he'd developed. "Now it provides precise finger control at a fraction of the cost of specialized prosthetic components." Jake's eyes lit up with understanding, like how we repurpose fuel injection sensors for diagnostic equipment. "Exactly. Good engineering isn't always about creating something new. Sometimes it's about seeing new potential in what already exists." The door chimed, and Mrs. Rodriguez entered with her grandson in tow. The boy's eyes went wide at the construction, activity visible through the windows. "Miguel was worried you wouldn't be fixing cars anymore," she said, smiling. "I told him you'd never abandon your old customers." Mike knelt to the boy's level. "Want to see something cool?" He led them to a corner of the shop where Chen's engineers had set up a demonstration area. Various prototypes showed the evolution of their affordable prosthetics program, from Mike's original design to the latest innovations. "In a few months, this whole place will be helping kids all over the world," he explained, "but we'll still be here for oil changes too." As if to emphasize his point, the familiar rumble of old Pete's truck rattled the windows. Jake moved to help him, confidently implementing Mike's signature mix of repair and improvisation. The architect approached with another set of plans. "Mr. Thompson, we need your input on the materials testing lab." Mike glanced at his watch. Nearly time for his video call with Tommy, who'd been helping test the improved prosthetic design. Each week, the boys' feedback helped refine their work, making the next version better, more intuitive. The workshop hummed with activity, construction crews laying foundation for the future, Jake learning the delicate balance of old and new skills, engineers and mechanics working side by side to solve problems. It was everything Sarah had dreamed of, technology serving people, innovation growing from practical experience. A delivery truck arrived, carrying their first batch of specialized equipment. Mike watched as the driver navigated carefully around Mrs. Rodriguez's Buick, past the worn toolboxes and gleaming new machines, a perfect metaphor for the transformation underway. The blueprints on his desk showed more than just a building. They revealed a bridge between worlds. In one room, cars would still be fixed with care and consideration for tight budgets. In another, life-changing devices would be developed using that same philosophy of accessibility and practical innovation. Mike picked up a wrench, his father's, worn smooth by decades of use, and placed it carefully on the new workbench. Some tools, like some values, would always have their place, no matter how much the world around them changed. The first production model sat on Mike's workbench, surrounded by testing equipment and quality control reports. It looked different from Tommy's original arm, more polished, more refined, but the heart of the design remained the same. Automotive, ingenuity meeting medical innovation, all in service of affordability. We've got another consistency issue, Sarah Chen, Alexander's head of engineering, pointed to a graph on her tablet. Unit 7 showed a 0.3-second delay in finger response. Time! Mike picked up the prosthetic, his practiced hands finding the source of the problem immediately. The recycled servo motors. They're all slightly different, even from the same model car. We need a way to calibrate each one individually. That's going to slow down production significantly, Sarah frowned. The board is expecting 500 units by month's end. Better slow than sorry, Mike replied, already sketching a calibration system on his notepad. Remember what your namesake used to say? He gestured to his late wife's photo. Quality is not just about how well something works. It's about how well it keeps working. The new facility buzzed with activity around them. In the training center, Jake was teaching a group of mechanics-turned-technicians how to identify suitable components from salvaged vehicles. The fabrication lab hummed with the sound of 3D printers creating custom fittings. Every corner represented a blend of old-world craftsmanship and cutting-edge technology. Mr. Thompson. Tommy's voice came through the video screen they'd set up for remote testing. He was their star product tester now, providing weekly feedback on each improvement. Watch this! They turned to see Tommy executing a perfect baseball. Pitch, the prosthetic arm moving in fluid coordination with his natural motion. But Mike noticed something in the follow-through, a slight stutter, barely perceptible. Tommy, do that again, son, but slower this time. The boy repeated the motion. Mike and Sarah Chen exchanged glances. They both saw it now. The wrist rotation, she said. Load-bearing stress during dynamic movement. He nodded. We focused so much on grip strength, we didn't account for the torque in athletic activities. A young engineer named Marcus approached, carrying their latest prototype. Maybe we're thinking about this wrong, he said. Instead of trying to make each salvaged motor perform identically, what if we embraced the variations? Mike raised an eyebrow, encouraging him to continue. We could develop adaptive software, Marcus explained, that learns each motor's quirks during the calibration phase. Like how every car engine has its own personality, but a good mechanic learns to work with it. The idea sparked something in Mike's mind. He walked to the wall where they'd hung his original designs next to the current specifications. That's it. We've been trying to force uniformity on components that were never meant to be uniform. Sarah Chen was already typing notes into her tablet. A learning algorithm combined with your mechanical expertise, it could actually work. The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Mike and Marcus worked on adapting the mechanical systems, while Sarah's team began developing the adaptive software. Tommy stayed connected via video, testing various movements and providing real-time feedback. By evening, they had a new prototype ready for initial testing. It wasn't perfect. The software still needed refinement, and the calibration process would need simplifying, but it was a breakthrough. Look at this. Mike demonstrated the arm's movement to Alexander Chen, who had arrived for their weekly review. Each unit will essentially customize itself to its components. Different motors, same result. Chen picked up the prototype, examining it with an expert's eye. "You're not just solving a production problem," he said thoughtfully. "You're creating a whole new approach to prosthetic development." Mike thought about all the cars he'd fixed. Over the years, how each required its own touch, its own understanding. Sometimes the best solutions come from accepting imperfection rather than fighting it. The first production model remained on his workbench, a reminder of how far they'd come and how far they had yet to go. Tomorrow, they would begin implementing the new system, training their team on the revised assembly process, updating their quality control procedures. But tonight, Mike stood in his workshop, the old section, where he still fixed cars 3 days a week, and smiled at Sarah's photo. "We're getting there, honey," he whispered. "One step at a time, we're getting there." The stack of thank you letters grew higher on Mike's desk each day. Some were written in crayon, decorated with stickers and drawings. Others came from parents, their words heavy with emotion. Each one told a story of transformation, of lives changed by the work they were doing. "Dear Mr. Thompson," one began, written in careful children's handwriting. "Yesterday, I helped my mom make cookies. I got to stir the bowl all by myself. Thank you for my new arm. Love, Emily." Mike picked up another letter, this one accompanied by a photograph of a young boy playing basketball. The prosthetic arm they'd developed was barely visible, looking natural in motion as the child shot the ball toward a hoop. The local news crew was setting up their equipment in the main workshop area. Chen had insisted on having Mike front and center for the story about their first major milestone, 500 prosthetic arms successfully delivered to children across the country. "You're the heart of this project," Chen had said when Mike protested. "People need to see that this isn't just about technology. It's about community, about making a difference one child at a time." Tommy was there too, having flown in with his father for the occasion. Now 12, he moved with confidence, his prosthetic arm as much a part of him as any natural limb. He'd become something of a mentor to new recipients, video chatting with them about his experiences and offering tips on mastering the device. "Mr. Thompson!" Tommy called out, leading a group of wide-eyed children and their parents through the facility. "Can we show them the testing room?" Mike smiled, recognizing the excitement in their faces, the same look Tommy had worn that first day in his old garage. "Of course. But first, I think some of our guests have something to share." One by one, the children demonstrated their new abilities. A girl named Lucy showed how she could now write her name. Marcus, a 10-year-old baseball enthusiast, threw a perfect pitch. Each achievement was met with applause from the assembled. Staff, engineers, mechanics, and administrators all united in celebration. "I remember when we couldn't afford even basic repairs for our car," one mother confided to Mike, wiping tears as she watched her son play catch with Tommy. The idea of getting James a prosthetic arm seemed impossible, but now the news reporter approached, microphone in hand. "Mr. Thompson, your team has managed to reduce the cost of advanced prosthetics by over 80%. How did you accomplish what major medical companies couldn't?" Mike glanced around the workshop, where salvaged car parts lay alongside cutting-edge electronics. "By remembering that innovation doesn't always mean creating something new. Sometimes it means looking at what we already have with fresh eyes." He led the camera crew through the facility, showing them how they transformed ordinary automotive components into life-changing devices. Jake demonstrated the calibration process, while Sarah Chen explained their adaptive software system. "Every car part we salvage," Mike explained, "every component we repurpose means another family can afford to help their child. That's what this has always been about." The reporter pointed to the wall of photographs, hundreds of smiling children with their new arms. "And these are all your success stories?" "No," Mike corrected gently. These are their success stories. We just provided the tools. They're the ones doing amazing things with them. Later, after the cameras had gone and the families had departed, Mike sat in his old office. The thank you letters surrounded him, each one a reminder of why they'd embarked on this journey. Tommy knocked softly on the doorframe. "Dad's taking me to my baseball game," he said. "Want to come watch? I'm pitching today." Mike looked at the boy who had started it all, whose simple dream of playing catch had launched this incredible adventure. Wouldn't miss it for the world. As they walked to the car, they passed the wall where Sarah's photo hung beside the original prototype. Mike had insisted on keeping both displayed prominently, reminders of the passion and purpose that had brought them here. "You know," Tommy said thoughtfully, "my teacher asked us to write about someone who changed the world. I wrote about you." Mike felt his throat tighten. "I'm not sure about changing the world, Tommy." "Well, you changed my world," Tommy replied, simply. "And now you're changing theirs too." He gestured to the wall of photos, each face representing a dream now within reach. The regulatory warning letter lay on Mike's desk, like a bomb waiting to explode. Its official letterhead and stark language cut through all the success and hope they'd built. Immediate review of manufacturing processes required. Potential. Safety concerns. Production suspension pending investigation. "They're questioning our use of repurposed automotive components," Sarah Chen explained, pacing the office. "Claiming we need additional safety protocols, more documentation of the salvage verification process." Mike read through the letter again, his jaw tightening. The bureaucratic language couldn't obscure the reality. Someone had filed a complaint about their methods, suggesting that using car parts for medical devices posed inherent risks. "We've got 300 units in production," Jake reported from the doorway. "What should I tell the team?" Before Mike could answer, his computer chimed with an incoming video call. Tommy's face appeared on the screen, concerned. "Mr. Thompson, Dad told me what happened, but they can't shut you down, right? You're helping people." Mike forced a smile for Tommy's benefit. "Don't worry, son, we'll figure this out." After ending the call, he turned to his team. "Stop production for now. Document everything exactly as it is, every component, every process." The news spread quickly through the facility. Mike watched his people, mechanics turned medical device technicians, engineers who'd embraced his unorthodox methods, trying to process what this meant. Some had left secure jobs to join this project, believing in its mission. "I should have seen this coming," Chen said, arriving at the workshop. Traditional medical device manufacturers were bound to push back eventually. "We're disrupting their entire market model." Mike walked through the suddenly quiet production floor, past workbenches where salvage parts waited to become something miraculous. Each component had been carefully selected, tested, and certified safe, but proving that to regulators would be another matter entirely. "Remember that Corvette owner?" Dave's voice came through on speakerphone during their emergency meeting. "The one who insisted aftermarket parts weren't safe enough for his precious car? Same thing here. People assuming expensive means better." "But we've got data," Sarah Chen insisted, pulling up their testing results. 500 successful units in the field, everyone performing above standard requirements. Our failure rate is actually lower than traditional prosthetics." Mike picked up one of their completed arms, running his fingers over the smooth joints and precise mechanisms. "We're not cutting corners, we're just solving problems differently." A small commotion outside the office drew their attention. Through the window, Mike saw Mrs. Rodriguez leading a group of parents toward the building. Many held signs, "Save our children's future and keep hope affordable." "Word's gotten out," Chen observed. "Those are all local families waiting for prosthetics." Mike thought of all the letters on his desk, all the children still hoping for their chance. The regulatory warnings seemed to mock their dreams, threatening to price them out of reach once again. "All right," he said finally, straightening up. "Here's what we're going to do." The team gathered around as Mike moved to the whiteboard, his mechanic's hands steady as he began to sketch. "We've been doing this right all along. Now we just need to prove it. Jake, pull every inspection record since day one. Sarah, get me detailed documentation of our testing protocols. I'll have our legal team review everything, Chen added, already on his phone. Dave, Mike continued, remember those medical supply chain certificates you helped me set up? We need them all, and I want photos of every single component we've ever used, with full documentation of its original certification and our adaptation process. The energy in the room shifted from despair to determination. This was just another problem to solve, another system to repair. One more thing, Mike said, picking up the warning letter. Get me Tommy, when the boy's face appeared on the screen. Again, Mike was ready. Tommy, remember how you helped us test the first designs? How your feedback made everything better? We need your help again. Tommy sat up straighter. Anything, Mr. Thompson. I need you to tell your story, how the arm changed your life. And I need you to reach out to others. All the kids who got their arms from us, because sometimes the best way to prove something works is to show it working, Tommy finished, understanding dawning on his face. Mike looked around at his team, at the facility they'd built, at the wall of smiling photographs. They'd faced challenges before, found solutions in unexpected places. This was no different. The warning letter had thrown a wrench in their works. But Mike Thompson had never met a broken machine he couldn't fix. The enhanced safety protocol document grew page by page as Mike and his team worked through the night. What had started as a crisis became an opportunity to revolutionize not just their production methods, but the entire approach to medical device safety testing. Look at this, Sarah Chen said, pointing to their new testing matrix. By adapting the automotive industry's crash test protocols, we've actually created a more rigorous safety standard than what traditional prosthetics undergo. Mike nodded, studying the comprehensive breakdown. Every component now had a triple verification process. Its original automotive safety certification, their adaptation testing, and a new series of stress tests that simulated years of use in minutes. It's like diagnosing a car, Jake added, excited by the breakthrough. You don't just check the part that's making noise, you test the whole system to prevent future problems. The facility had transformed into a round-the-clock operation, but not for production. Every workstation now focused on documentation and testing. Engineers worked alongside mechanics, combining their expertise to prove what they'd known all along. Their methods weren't just cost-effective, they were superior. Tommy's video campaign had gone viral. Hundreds of kids who'd received their prosthetics shared stories, demonstrations, achievements. Each video provided real-world validation of their design's durability and effectiveness. The regulatory board wants to inspect the facility, Chen announced, entering with his tablet. But we've got something they've never seen before. Mike led the team through their new testing area. The enhanced safety protocol had led to innovations in quality control that no one had anticipated. Using automotive diagnostic technology, they'd developed a way to predict potential failures before they occurred. Each prosthetic now has its own diagnostic system, Mike explained to the team. Like a check engine light for your arm. It can tell you when maintenance is needed before any real problems develop. Sarah Chen pulled up the data on the main screen. Traditional prosthetics fail suddenly, leaving users without warning. Our system gives advance notice, making repairs preventive rather than reactive. The documentation was impressive. Thousands of test hours, detailed material analysis, real-world performance data. But Mike's favorite part was simpler, a wall of photographs showing their prosthetics in action. Kids playing sports, making art, living life without limitations. Remember what you taught me about carburetors? Jake asked, showing a junior engineer their new testing procedure. How you have to think about the whole fuel system, not just the part making trouble. We applied that same principle here. The regulatory inspection was scheduled for morning. Mike spent one last evening in his old garage, thinking about how far they'd come. The smell of oil and metal shaving still lingered, mixing now with the clean laboratory scent from the new facility. Sarah's photo watched over him as he made final notes on their presentation. "You'd love this part," he told her, taking something that seemed like a setback and turning it into an advancement. "That was always your specialty." The next morning, the inspection team arrived to find not a medical device facility scrambling to meet standards, but an operation that had revolutionized those standards. Mike led them through each station, demonstrating how automotive engineering principles had created unprecedented safety measures. "In a car," he explained, showing them the diagnostic system, "you want to know about problems before they strand. You on the highway, we applied that same thinking to prosthetics. Why should someone have to wait for their arm to fail before knowing it needs attention?" The inspectors were particularly impressed by their material testing protocols. Using stress test methods developed for vehicle safety, they could simulate a lifetime of use in controlled conditions. "Every component has a story," Mike demonstrated, pulling up their detailed database. "We know where it came from, what it was certified for originally, how we modified it, and how it's been tested since. Nothing goes into an arm without this level of documentation." Tommy made a surprise appearance via video call during the inspection, demonstrating his pitching skills for the regulatory team. "Mr. Thompson didn't just give me an arm," he told them. "He taught me how it works, how to take care of it, how to trust it." By day's end, the inspection team had seen something unprecedented, a perfect marriage of automotive engineering and medical device innovation with safety protocols that exceeded industry standards. The enhanced safety protocol they'd developed would become more than just a response to a crisis. It would set new standards for the entire industry, proving that sometimes the best way to overcome an obstacle is to raise the bar for everyone. The Foundation's new logo gleamed on the wall of Mike's expanded facility, a stylized arm, reaching upward, formed from interlocking mechanical components. Below it, the motto read, "Innovation through integration." It perfectly captured what they'd achieved, the marriage of automotive engineering and medical technology, of practical experience and cutting-edge research. "The first international center opens next month in Mexico City," Chen reported during their monthly review. "They've already identified local mechanics and engineers for training. Mike, they're particularly interested in your mentorship program." Mike looked around the conference room, still amazed by how far they'd come. What had started in his humble garage had grown into a global initiative. The original workshop remained. He still spent Wednesday afternoons there, teaching Jake's advanced certification class, but it was now surrounded by a campus dedicated to affordable medical innovation. "Tommy's starting college next fall," Chen continued, smiling. "He wants to study biomedical engineering, says someone needs to carry on the family tradition." The mention of tradition made Mike think of Sarah. She would have loved seeing their old dream of accessible technology taking shape on such a grand scale. Her engineering textbooks, now displayed in the facility's library, had inspired a new generation of problem solvers. A group of visitors passed by the conference room windows, mechanics from auto shops across the country, here to learn how they could participate in the program. Mike had insisted that local repair shops be integral to their expansion plans. "Every community has its Mike Thompson," he'd argued to the board. "Someone who knows how to fix things, who understands their neighbors' needs. We just have to give them the right tools and training." The training program had exceeded all expectations. Mechanics brought decades of practical experience to the world of medical devices, while engineers learned the value of hands-on problem-solving. Together, they were revolutionizing not just prosthetics, but the entire approach to affordable medical technology. "Show them the numbers from the pilot program," Sarah Chen suggested, pulling up a presentation. The statistics were impressive. Thousands of children fitted with prosthetics at a fraction of traditional costs, but more importantly, their enhanced safety protocols had led to industry-wide improvements. Other manufacturers were adopting their diagnostic monitoring system, making all prosthetics safer and more reliable. "We've got something else to discuss," Chen said, growing serious. "The World Health Organization is interested in expanding our model to other medical devices. They believe our approach could help address equipment shortages in underserved areas." Mike thought about all the times he'd improvised repairs for people who couldn't afford new parts. The same principle could apply to medical equipment. Finding ways to maintain and adapt existing resources rather than always requiring the newest, most expensive solutions. The Foundation's logo caught the afternoon sun, casting a pattern of interlocking shadows across the conference table. Each component in the design represented part of their success: the practical wisdom of mechanics, the precision of engineering, the importance of community connections. "There's a girl in Brazil," Chen continued, showing them a video. "She's been repairing medical equipment in her village using car parts and creativity. Reminds me of someone else I know." The video showed a teenage girl explaining how she'd fixed an ultrasound machine using components from a car's electrical system. Her eyes shone with the same determination Mike had seen in Tommy's face years ago. "She's already submitted an application for our international training program," Sarah Chen added, "along with hundreds of others like her." Mike walked to the window, looking out over the facility. In the parking lot, a familiar sight caught his eye: Mrs. Rodriguez's old Buick, still running thanks to Jake's careful maintenance. Some things hadn't changed, even as everything else had evolved. "You know what this means?" he said finally, turning back to the room. "We're not just building arms anymore. We're building bridges between different fields, different approaches, different parts of the world." The Foundation's logo seemed to pulse with possibility. What had started as one mechanic's solution for one child had grown into something that could change countless lives. But at its heart, the mission remained the same: finding simple, practical ways to help people. Their legacy wouldn't just be the prosthetics they created or the safety standards they'd established. It would be this new way of thinking about innovation, seeing potential in the ordinary, finding solutions in unexpected places, and never forgetting that the most important measure of success was the people they helped. The workshop photo hung in a place of honor at the Foundation's first anniversary celebration. The old team and the new, standing together in front of Mike's original garage. Dave from medical supply, Jake with his newly certified technicians, Sarah Chen and her engineering team, and in the center Mike with Tommy beside him, both beaming with pride. "I remember the first time I walked into this shop," Tommy said during his speech, now a confident young man heading to college. "I was scared, holding my grandmother's hand, carrying a crayon drawing of an impossible dream. But Mr. Thompson didn't see impossible. He saw a problem that needed solving." The audience included families from around the world, children running and playing with prosthetic arms that bore the Foundation's logo. In the back, Mike spotted Mrs. Rodriguez, who still brought her Buick in for regular maintenance. Some things didn't need to change. "What Mr. Thompson taught me wasn't just about having two arms," Tommy continued. "He taught me that every problem has a solution if you're willing to look at it differently. That's why I'm studying biomedical engineering, because I want to help find those solutions." Mike stood at the back of the room, Sarah's photo in his pocket. He could almost hear her voice. "See, Mike, sometimes the best innovations come from the heart." The facility hummed with activity even during the celebration. In one room, mechanics from 3 continents learned new techniques. In another, engineers tested improvements to their diagnostic systems. Each space represented a perfect blend of practical knowledge and technological advancement. "The next generation will do even better," Chen said, joining Mike by the workshop doors. "They'll have what we didn't, the understanding that sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones." Mike watched Tommy demonstrating his pitching technique to a young girl with a newly fitted arm. Full circle, he thought. One dream inspiring another, on and on. "You know," he said quietly. "Sarah used to say that true innovation isn't about inventing something new. It's about helping people in ways they never thought possible." The setting sun cast long shadows through the workshop windows, just as it had on that first evening when Mike had decided to try something impossible. The tools might have changed, the facility might have grown, but the heart of it all remained the same: people helping people, one solution at a time.